The science of hyperempathy, why you feel everything others won't admit. Welcome to my channel, Habit Compass. Today, we're jumping right into a deeply profound explainer covering the very real, often invisible weight that so many of you carry every single day. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt the tension, even when everyone is smiling? Or maybe you've looked at a friend or a coworker and known with absolute certainty that they're struggling long before they've even fully realized it themselves? It's almost as if you have an internal antenna picking up on a frequency literally no one else can hear. Well, in this explainer, we're going to unpack the fascinating science and psychology behind this phenomenon. We're going to visualize exactly how this invisible emotional transfer works, and most importantly, we're going to explore why your brain was wired to do this in the first place.
You aren't too sensitive. You're highly tuned. I really want you to let that sink in for a moment. Because if you experience this, you have likely spent your entire life being told that you are overreacting. You've probably been told that you read way too much into things or that you just need a thicker skin. But your lived experience tells a completely different story, doesn't it? What you're experiencing is absolutely not a flaw. You are not broken. Your emotional radar is actually a highly tuned, super sophisticated instrument. You're picking up on micro-expressions, subtle shifts in body language, and tiny changes in vocal tone that bypass the average person entirely. You are processing real data. It's a profound skill, but as we're going to see, it is a skill that comes with an incredible cost.
Okay, let's dive into this and visualize exactly how this emotional transfer happens in real time. We need to map out the invisible mechanics of what actually occurs when your highly tuned radar locks on to someone else's hidden emotional state.
Imagine someone standing right in front of you. To the rest of the world, they're wearing that familiar mask, projecting a cheerful, "I'm fine." And to most people, they probably look completely fine. But that is not what you see. When you look at them, you don't just hear the words, "I'm fine." You perceive a massive, heavy, dark blue cloud hovering right over their head. You see through the mask entirely. There is a jarring contrast between the outward projection they're presenting to the world and the heavy, undeniable emotional reality that you are actively perceiving. You're standing there witnessing a storm that they are pretending isn't happening.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact sequence of the burden you carry. First, you observe that hidden emotion, that heavy blue cloud. But it doesn't stop there. Suddenly, your own heart starts to glow the exact same shade of blue. An invisible line connects your nervous system directly to theirs. You aren't just observing their pain, you are downloading it. You're mirroring it perfectly within your own body, which inevitably leads to a state of profound physical exhaustion. Because think about it. Processing your own emotions takes energy, but processing the denied, hidden emotions of the people around you, that takes a monumental toll on your system.
What we've just visualized actually has a name. It's a concrete psychological concept called hyperempathy, which is defined as the automatic and intense tracking of emotional states in others. Notice those words, automatic and intense. This isn't a conscious choice you're making. You aren't deciding to play detective and investigate someone's emotional state. Your brain is automatically scanning, tracking, and absorbing this data without your permission. It is a reflex. By anchoring our visual metaphor of the blue cloud and the glowing heart into this formal definition, we can start to see hyperempathy not as some kind of magic or intuition, but as an intense, relentless cognitive and emotional tracking system.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it naturally provokes a fascinating question. Why? Why on earth is your brain wired to automatically and intensely track the emotional states of other people? To answer that, we have to pull back the curtain on the childhood origins of this behavior. People aren't usually born with their emotional radar dialed up to a 10. This kind of hypervigilance is built. It's constructed over time, usually quite early in life. It doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from necessity. Hyperempathy fundamentally develops as a survival tool. For many highly tuned individuals, this began in childhood. It stems from an environment where you needed to constantly track the emotional states of your caregivers just to stay safe. If you grew up with a caregiver who was unpredictable, volatile, or perhaps even emotionally absent, your developing brain quickly realized that surprises were dangerous. So you learned to read the room before you even stepped into it. You learned to monitor the environment, a tiny micro-expression, the specific way a door was shut, a subtle shift in tone, so you could adjust your own behavior to keep the peace and stay secure. Your hyperempathy was your armor, your early warning system. It kept you safe back then, but it means you are perpetually scanning the horizon now. So the crucial point is understanding how this childhood survival mechanism functions in your adult life today. The crisis is over, but the tracking system is still running perfectly in the background 24/7. And that brings us to the final unavoidable implication, the hyper-empathy battery drain. Constantly running this background program, continuously glowing blue with the immense weight of other people's unspoken clouds, takes a massive physical and emotional toll on the adult carrying it. Your body literally treats this emotional processing as real heavy labor.
I want you to imagine leaning against a wall, completely and utterly drained, with a flashing battery icon hovering right next to you, sitting at a critical 1%. This is the lived reality of hyperempathy. You aren't tired just because you've had a busy day at work. You're depleted because you have spent the entire day carrying the invisible emotional weight of everyone you interacted with. You have been processing the grief, the anxiety, and the stress that they wouldn't admit to, and it has absolutely emptied your reserves. Your battery is flatlining, not from your own life, but from the invisible echoes of everyone else's. Which leaves us with this final vital question. How will you manage your own invisible echoes? Understanding the science and the origins of your hyperempathy is really only the first step. You possess a highly tuned, incredible instrument, but if you don't learn how to switch off the receiver, it is going to drain you down to nothing. Now that you can clearly see the heavy burden of the invisible cords you attach to others, what boundaries will you put in place to protect your own 1%? How will you begin to safeguard your own emotional energy? Think about that for a while. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and I'll see you in the next one.